All right, everyone, we start off today with the State of Union in focus, of course. The State of the Union delivered by Biden, of course, earlier, last night, rather. Of course, my time zones are different. That's why I couldn't live react to it. I've seen some clips from it, some read-ups about it. Certainly got plenty of DMs tipping me off to juicy moments. It was boring, painfully so, because basically it was just a reiteration of talking points that we knew that he was going to talk about anyway. Well, I've lowered the deficit by a historic amount. My job growth, blah, blah, blah. Painting a rosy picture of the economy that doesn't exist for the average American, and then saying, but there's more work to do. Yes, there are still some people that are making ends meet that can buy eggs. Quick, we got to change that. You'll notice no meaningful change to the border, although he did call once again for a general amnesty for everyone illegally in the United States, which would cripple the U.S. economy, considering the number of people that are part of that group. But I digress, because of course that's not mentioned really in his speech. The only real juicy moments, first a brief panning over Mitch McConnell. He doesn't have his flag lapel on, that's sort of a Republican Party tradition, but he did manage to find a Ukraine tie to wear to the State of the Union. You had a few moments where the Republicans heckled Biden and he went off the rails in response. I found the response to that actually more funny than the initial GOP response. And then we'll talk about Sarah Huckabee Sanders in a moment too, because what the fuck? The Republicans heckle him, of course, on several of his claims. For instance, there's the claim that the Republicans want to sundown Medicare. They want to get rid of your medical coverage if you're old and infirm. That's not really a proposal that's being considered by the GOP. He attempts to reiterate, well, no, it's only a few people within your party that are saying this. I just thought I would call it out. And I'm thinking to myself, if the party itself at large, the unipartyists, the MAGA crowd certainly is not part of that. If these individuals are not seriously proposing something, and it doesn't have legs, and it's not going to get out of committee anyway, why bother bringing it up for the purposes of clout seeking? The response, though, to the Republicans calling him a liar and booing him was even funnier, though. You see people saying, well, they're not being there's no decorum there. They should show some respect. And I was thinking to myself about these same people applauding Nancy Pelosi for her sideways clapping, her passive aggressiveness, and ripping up the State of the Union speech back years ago when Donald Trump was giving it. The idea that there's any sort of decorum between parties, that the president is not going to jab at the other side of the aisle, that the other side of the aisle is not going to boo, or they're not going to refuse to clap, or they're going to stay seated when they ought to be standing. This is like a tradition yearly now at the State of the Union. The old days of having any form of actual decorum in the chamber when the president is speaking is a bygone facet of 20, 30 years ago. You don't really see that anymore, so for people to bitch about that, members of either party, by the way, is pretty funny. I think Nancy Pelosi took it furthest of all with ripping up the speech that one time. Wasn't that 2018 or thereabouts? 2019? The years all run together at this point. I'm getting old. Then you had Sarah Huckabee Sanders, currently a governor, delivering the rebuttal to the State of the Union. And I was thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, what the fuck happened to her? Just to be clear, look at Sarah Huckabee Sanders' response to the State of the Union. My God, certainly her plastic surgeon has a little bit of a sense of humor, I think. The rebuttal's good overall. It points out that Biden lied repeatedly. And even some of the mainline liberal fact checkers were willing to admit a few misleading moments. Although you'll note, if you look at CNN and similar groups and their fact check of the entire spiel from Joe Biden, they are very careful and selective in what they fact check. They gloss over it's a lie by omission, by the way, just so you know. You gloss over the parts where you'd have to fact check and say, well, that's misleading or that's false, and you only fixate on the raw numbers that actually pass the sniff test. Some of those don't actually pass the sniff test. They're still misleading, but somehow mysteriously are not labeled so. The one major claim is that Biden brought down the deficit. Well, it's the biggest deficit reduction in a long time. Well, yeah, that's because the economy overinflated as the result initially of Trump's pandemic bailout spending. That was a big thing, by the way, which I opposed at the time and did cause a spike in inflation. That spike ended a while ago, though. At this point, it's Bidenflation, And his other claim about inflation coming down relies upon the public's gullibility because, of course, inflation is not a month-over-month number. It is a year-over-year number. If inflation were actually falling, the number itself would have to fall considerably further because it's being matched to a number that was already inflated. That part of the data, by the way, is never really taught to the public unless a person has taken a bunch of economical classes or something, or unless they have to fucking analyze this shit for a living like me. They're probably not even aware of that compacting of that number over time. Yeah, right now we would need negative inflation for an extended period just to restore our money to some semblance of usefulness, but that's not going to happen because of Keynesian policies. The state of the disunion would really be the way to put it, though, when we look at the breaches of decorum, by both Biden and by the GOP, just to be fair. When we look at the litany of half-truths that were spewed out, when we look at the entire facade and the entire charade that it is, because the State of the Union has become a debacle, a spectacle for the American public. Originally it was just, hey, the president once a year has to deliver a message to Congress, which can, by the way, be in letter form. He doesn't actually have to show up himself, and he will tell him, hey, things are going fine, or hey, things are all messed up. Here's how the war is going. The earthquake killed this many people. Here's what your tax increases would do according to my advisors or something. That's all they have to do. It can be a one-page written note for all anyone cares, but it's become a spectator sport. Really, in the end, looking just at parts of the State of the Union, I'm actually happy that I was asleep at the time due to my time zone difference, because it would have been a goddamn waste of my time to even live react to this bullshit. There was nothing in here that wasn't fully expected other than Marjorie Taylor Greene yelling liar, a few Republicans booing over the Medicare issue, and Mitch McConnell's tie. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders looking absolutely horrendous in her response. But by the way, they probably should have chosen somebody else for that. Although, again, it was better than the State of the Union itself because it actually clarifies a few points that Biden neglected to make. Yeah, so here are his plans going forward for the next couple of years. More of the same. Yeah, that's really exciting, and it's going to be really helpful. I'm sure it'll uplift a lot of people's lives. That's about all. Peace out.